The Making of the Mahatma, Humble Beginnings and Moral Roots. Hello and welcome to the first part of our inspiring series on one of the world's most transformative leaders, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. His life proves that the quietest individuals can possess the most revolutionary power. Mohandas was born on October 2, 1869, in Porbandar, a coastal town in Gujarat. His father was a Diwan, chief minister, of a small state, and his mother, Putlabai, was a deeply religious woman. She instilled in him the values of fasting, prayer, and unconditional compassion. Young Mohandas was profoundly influenced by the principles of Jainism, particularly ahimsa, nonviolence, and vegetarianism. He confessed in his autobiography to being a shy, mediocre student, deeply afraid of speaking in public. This initial shyness makes his later transformation into one of history's most influential orators all the more motivational. At the age of 13, he was married to Kasturba Makhanji Kapadia, Kasturba, known affectionately as Ba. Their relationship was complex, evolving from a traditional childhood marriage into a partnership of equals who endured the immense pressures of political activism together. The leap to London. In 1888, Mohandas took the daring step of traveling to London to study law. This was a massive cultural and financial leap for his family. Before leaving, he took a solemn vow to his mother that he would abstain from meat, alcohol, and women, vows he maintained strictly in a foreign land. Initially, he struggled to fit in. He tried to adopt English customs, buying expensive clothes, learning to dance, and practicing elocution. However, he soon realized this imitation was superficial. He returned to his simple, authentic self, finding solace in serious philosophical and religious study. While in London, he read the Bhagavad Gita and was introduced to the works of authors like Leo Tolstoy and Henry David Thoreau, whose ideas on civil disobedience and simple living began to shape his intellectual foundation. His 3 years in London were not just about legal training. They were about a quiet, internal process of self-discovery and moral fortification. The call to action, the South Africa Crucible. Gandhi returned to India in 1891, hoping to start a successful legal practice, but he met with little success. His shyness held him back in court. In 1893, he accepted a one-year contract to work for an Indian firm in Natal, South Africa. He went to South Africa as a professional lawyer. He left as a political revolutionary. South Africa at that time was defined by entrenched racial segregation and discrimination against Indian laborers and traders. Gandhi's status as a well-educated lawyer offered him no protection from this racism. The incident that changed the course of his life happened shortly after his arrival. While traveling from Durban to Pretoria, he held a first-class ticket, yet he was ordered by a railway official to move to the van compartment due to his skin color. When he refused to comply, he was forcibly thrown off the train at the Pietermaritzburg station in the cold darkness of the night. Sitting freezing and angry on that lonely platform, Gandhi had a choice. He could return to India, or he could stay and fight the injustice. He chose the latter. This moment of personal humiliation became the defining pivot for his commitment to justice. Forging the weapon of Satyagraha, Gandhi stayed in South Africa for 21 years. During this period, he developed and perfected his powerful method of nonviolent resistance, which he called Satyagraha, literally, insistence on truth or truth force. It was not passive resistance. It was active, ethical resistance requiring immense moral strength and courage. His philosophy was based on the belief that it was the duty of the resistor to endure suffering willingly, without retaliation. He believed that this act of suffering would ultimately appeal to the conscience of the oppressor, forcing a change of heart. He organized the Indian community to protest discriminatory laws, such as the Black Act, which required Indians to register and carry passes, and later attacks levied on former indentured laborers. He faced repeated arrests, endured brutal beatings, and was imprisoned multiple times. Yet, he never wavered in his commitment to nonviolence. He set up the Phoenix Settlement and later the Tolstoy Farm, communities where residents lived simply, practiced self-sufficiency, and trained in the disciplined, ethical principles of Satyagraha. These farms became the training grounds for the political action that would eventually free India. Gandhi's unwavering perseverance in South Africa against a powerful colonial government proved the effectiveness of his method. By 1914, he had achieved significant concessions from the South African government, marking a successful end to his Satyagraha campaign there. When he finally sailed back to India in 1915, he was no longer the timid lawyer but the revered Mahatma, armed with a revolutionary, ethical weapon ready to face the challenge of Indian independence. Part 2. The Architect of Independence. The Return and the Re-Education of India. Welcome back to our inspirational series on Mahatma Gandhi. In Part 1, we saw how the timid lawyer was forged into the resolute activist in South Africa. In this segment, we explore his monumental return to India and how he mobilized an entire nation. Gandhi returned to India in January 1915 at the age of 45. He was already a celebrated figure due to his victories against racism in South Africa, but he was unknown to the common Indian masses. Following the advice of his political mentor, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, Gandhi decided to spend his first year traveling extensively across India. He traveled mostly by third-class train compartment, observing the immense poverty, the deep-seated fear of British authority, and the structural inequities that crippled the nation. He made a crucial decision to abandon the formal, Western attire he wore in South Africa and adopt the simplest clothing of the Indian peasant, the dhoti and later the homespun khadi. This was a deliberate and powerful symbolic act. By living simply and identifying completely with the poor, he instantly bridged the gap between the educated elite and the masses, earning him the genuine love and trust of millions. He transformed the political movement from an elite conversation into a true mass movement. Testing Satyagraha on Indian soil. Gandhi's initial focus was not on grand national politics, but on local injustices, proving the power of Satyagraha on Indian soil. The first major successful application was in Champaran, 1917. Farmers there were forced to grow indigo for British landlords and were subjected to severe exploitation. Gandhi arrived, conducted a massive, meticulous inquiry into the farmers' grievances, and was ordered by the British authorities to leave the district. His refusal to comply, stating simply that he was there to serve the suffering people, led to his arrest. The sheer volume of non-violent support from the farmers, who crowded the courts demanding his release, forced the British to drop the case and eventually dismantle the exploitative system. Next came the Ahmedabad mill strike, 1918, where he supported mill workers demanding better wages, using a fast as a powerful moral pressure tactic. Finally, the Khadi Satyagraha, 1918, saw him lead farmers against the government's demand for full land revenue despite widespread crop failure. In all these cases, his commitment to truth and nonviolence resulted in victory for the poor. These local campaigns were crucial. They taught the Indian public the methodology of nonviolent resistance and cemented Gandhi's status as a leader who delivered tangible results. The rise of non-cooperation. The turning point that launched Gandhi onto the national stage was the horrific Jallianwala Bagh massacre in 1919, where British troops fired on a peaceful crowd, killing hundreds. This act of extreme brutality shattered the remaining faith in British benevolence. In response, Gandhi launched the non-cooperation movement, 1920 to 1922. His central idea was that British rule survived because Indians cooperated with it. If Indians simply withdrew their cooperation, the empire would collapse. The movement called for boycotting British goods, courts, and schools, resigning from government titles and services, promoting Swadeshi, self-reliance, symbolized by spinning khadi, hand-woven cloth, to replace British textiles. Millions joined. Students left government schools, lawyers abandoned courts, and bonfires were lit with foreign cloth. The movement was a spectacular success in uniting Hindus and Muslims and energizing the masses. It was a period of intense discipline and nonviolence. However, in 1922, a violent incident occurred at Chauri Chaura, where a crowd burned down a police station, killing several policemen. Gandhi, a staunch believer that means must always justify the end, was horrified. He immediately called off the entire national movement, facing criticism from within his own party. His decision demonstrated his unwavering commitment to nonviolence, proving that the movement's moral purity was more important to him than its political expediency. The commitment to Swaraj and social reform. Following the suspension of the movement, Gandhi was arrested and served a 2-year sentence. Upon his release, he shifted his focus to constructive work, He realized that true Swaraj, self-rule, required not just political freedom, but profound social and economic reform within India itself. He dedicated himself to three major areas. 1. Promotion of khadi, encouraging every Indian to spin and weave, fostering economic self-sufficiency in villages. 2. Hindu-Muslim unity, working tirelessly to bridge the growing divide between the communities. 3. Eradication of untouchability. He fought fiercely against the practice of untouchability, calling the oppressed community Harijans, children of God, and focusing on the social upliftment of the lowest castes, declaring that true freedom was impossible without this social reform. This constructive phase was vital, as it ensured that the fight for independence was rooted not only in political agitation, but also in the moral and social betterment of the Indian soul. He was preparing the nation internally for the responsibilities of freedom. Part 3. The symbol of salt. The quiet preparation for the next battle. Welcome back to the third chapter of our inspiring series on the life of Mahatma Gandhi. In the 1920s, after suspending the non-cooperation movement, Gandhi dedicated himself to constructive work, promoting khadi, fighting untouchability, and fostering village self-sufficiency. This period of quiet, disciplined social reform was crucial as it strengthened the moral and organizational base of the Congress Party, preparing the nation for the next great confrontation. By the late 1920s, the political atmosphere was once again charged. Despite years of resistance, the British government showed no signs of granting India Swaraj, self-rule. The Indian National Congress, under the influence of younger, more radical leaders, began demanding full independence. Gandhi, sensing the mood of the nation and the need for a powerful, symbolic movement to unify all classes, returned to the forefront of political agitation. The challenge was to find an issue that was simple, easily understood by the poorest citizens, and touched every single person regardless of religion or caste. The issue had to be morally pure, allowing for pure Satyagraha. He found his answer in the most fundamental commodity, salt. Challenging an empire with a pinch of salt. The British government held a strict monopoly on salt production and sale in India. They imposed a heavy tax on salt, making it illegal for Indians to collect or sell salt, even though it was freely available from the sea. This tax disproportionately harmed the poorest citizens, for whom salt was a critical necessity, essential for life. Gandhi declared that taxing a necessity of life was the most inhumane form of colonialism. He announced the Salt Satyagraha, or the Dandi March. This was not just a protest against a tax. It was a profound act of civil disobedience against the entire system of foreign rule. On March 12, 1930, at the age of 61, Gandhi began his epic march from his ashram, Sabarmati, with just 78 devoted followers. The journey was planned to cover approximately 240 miles to the coastal village of Dandi. The march itself became a daily spectacle that captured the world's imagination. News reporters, photographers, and journalists from around the globe followed the small band of marchers. The atmosphere was electrifying. Gandhi walked slowly but resolutely, spinning cotton and praying every day. Along the route, he stopped in dozens of villages, speaking to immense crowds, urging them to join the movement, renounce fear, and commit to nonviolent resistance. The power of symbolic defiance. The power of the Dandi March lay entirely in its symbolism. It wasn't about the amount of salt collected. It was about the act of defiance against a powerful empire, performed in the most peaceful, public manner possible. After 24 days of walking, Gandhi reached the shores of Dandi on April 6, 1930. He walked into the sea, performed his morning prayers, and then bent down to pick up a small lump of natural salt mud. With this single, simple gesture, he had technically broken the law. He symbolically chipped away at the foundation of British authority. The reaction was immediate and massive. Once Gandhi broke the law, the message spread like wildfire. Across the entire coastline of India, millions of people followed suit. Villagers began making illegal salt, and in cities, citizens openly sold prohibited salt. The defiance became a true mass movement. The government's monopoly was effectively shattered by the people's collective courage. Facing the brutality with peace, the British regime responded with brutal force. Over 60,000 people, including Gandhi, were arrested in the following weeks and months. One of the most famous events was the Darasena Salt Works Satyagraha. Gandhi's successor, Abbas Tyabji, and later Sarojini Naidu, led thousands of nonviolent volunteers to protest the salt depot. American journalist Webb Miller witnessed the scene and described it in horror. Wave after wave of unarmed protesters walked up to the gates, only to be beaten down by British-led Indian police with heavy steel-tipped lathis, batons. Miller reported. Not one of the marchers even raised an arm to fend off the blows. They marched, they fell, and were carried away. Historical photo of police beating satyagrahis at Darasena. These brutal scenes, reported widely by the international press, created a public relations disaster for the British Empire. The world saw the stark contrast. The moral purity of the nonviolent protesters against the sheer brutality of the armed, repressive state. The civil disobedience movement had succeeded not just in breaking the salt law, but in breaking the moral credibility of the British Raj. The Salt Satyagraha demonstrated that nonviolent action could be incredibly effective and emotionally devastating to the oppressor. It mobilized women in unprecedented numbers and united different regions under a single banner of simple, peaceful defiance. It was a victory not won by weapons, but by the courage of the human spirit. This concludes Part 3 of our series. Get ready for Part 4, where we will cover the final push for independence, including the Quit India movement. Part 4. The Final Push and the Quit India Movement. Navigating the Political Wilderness. Welcome back to the fourth part of our comprehensive look at the life and legacy of Mahatma Gandhi. After the monumental success of the Salt Satyagraha, Gandhi continued to lead the independence movement, but the path was fraught with complex political challenges. In 1931, Gandhi participated in the Round Table Conference in London, representing the Congress Party. He went not in formal attire, but in his simple khadi loincloth, a defiant statement of his allegiance to the poor of India. Although the conference failed to achieve any meaningful progress towards full independence, Gandhi used the opportunity to speak directly to the British public and the international press, showcasing the moral righteousness of India's cause. He returned empty-handed, but with his stature as a global figure significantly enhanced. Throughout the 1930s, Gandhi temporarily stepped back from the active leadership of the Congress Party to focus intensely on his social reform agenda. He campaigned vigorously against the scourge of untouchability, which he considered a blot on Hinduism. He undertook a crucial fast unto death in 1932 to prevent the British from creating separate electorates for untouchables, believing that this would permanently divide the Hindu community. His moral pressure succeeded, and the system was altered, demonstrating that Gandhi could use the fast as his ultimate moral weapon to achieve political and social goals. This focus on internal reform, uplifting the rural poor and fighting social prejudice, was fundamental to his belief that India must be morally strong to deserve and sustain its freedom. He knew that political power alone, without social justice, would be meaningless. The looming global conflict. As the 1930s drew to a close, the world was plunging into World War II. Great Britain declared that India was also at war with the Axis powers, without consulting any Indian leaders. The Indian National Congress was incensed by this unilateral declaration. They demanded an assurance of full independence after the war in exchange for India's support. The British government refused to give a firm commitment. Gandhi, a staunch pacifist committed to nonviolence in all circumstances, was morally torn. While he deeply sympathized with the plight of the nations fighting Nazism and fascism, he could not reconcile supporting a war effort run by the very power that suppressed India's freedom. He believed that even defending democracy should not require the use of violence, an ideal that many found impossibly difficult to follow. The political deadlock grew severe. The Congress ministries that had been elected in various provinces resigned in protest. As the war dragged on, the mood in India became increasingly restless. Leaders within the Congress felt that this was the opportune time to force the British to leave. The Quit India moment. In the early 1940s, with the war weakening Britain and the patience of the Indian people running out, Gandhi made the most daring political move of his life. On August 8, 1942, in Mumbai, then Bombay, the Congress Working Committee passed the Quit India resolution. Gandhi delivered one of his most powerful and memorable speeches, calling for an immediate end to British rule. The entire speech was a battle cry for freedom, not a request. In his speech, he issued the stirring instruction to the people of India, do or die. Historic photo of Mahatma Gandhi giving the Quit India speech. This was not a call to violence, but a call to absolute, unyielding commitment to the cause of freedom. He asked every Indian to live as if they were free, to refuse to bow to authority, and to commit every fiber of their being to the goal of independence. The directive was clear: either we secure our freedom or we perish in the attempt. Suppression and uprising. The British government reacted with immediate and harsh suppression. Within hours of the speech, Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, and almost the entire leadership of the Congress Party were arrested and imprisoned without trial. The arrest of the leaders, however, did not stop the movement, it fueled it. The lack of central leadership meant the movement became a spontaneous, decentralized uprising across the country. Students, farmers, and factory workers erupted in mass protests. Railway stations were attacked, communication lines were disrupted, and local governments were established in some areas. The British response was overwhelmingly brutal. Mass arrests, police firing, and repression were widespread. Tens of thousands were imprisoned, and hundreds were killed. Though officially nonviolent, the movement saw violence erupt on both sides due to the lack of guidance from the imprisoned leadership. Gandhi spent the next 3 years in prison at the Aga Khan Palace in Pune. During this period, he endured personal tragedy when his secretary, Mahadev Desai, and his devoted wife, Kasturba Gandhi, both passed away while imprisoned with him. These personal losses weighed heavily on him, yet his spirit remained unbroken. The Quit India movement did not immediately force the British to leave, but it sent an unmistakable signal to the world. The British Raj had lost the will and the moral authority to govern India. It was only a matter of time before the political negotiations for independence would begin in earnest. The courage of those who participated laid the groundwork for the final political settlement. We have reached the climax of the struggle. Now, we move to the final chapter, the realization of independence, the tragedy of partition, and Gandhi's eternal legacy. Part 5. The Final Sacrifice and Eternal Legacy. Negotiating the Dawn of Freedom. Welcome to the fifth and final part of our powerful series on the life of Mahatma Gandhi. In this segment, we explore the bittersweet victory of independence and the enduring global impact of his philosophy. After his release from prison in 1944, Gandhi returned to a political landscape that had dramatically changed. The British, exhausted by the World War, were finally ready to transfer power. However, the greatest challenge now was not the foreign ruler, but the rising domestic conflict between the Indian National Congress, representing a largely Hindu population, and the Muslim League, led by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who demanded a separate Muslim state, Pakistan. Gandhi was vehemently opposed to the division of India, believing in a unified nation where all religions could coexist harmoniously. He worked tirelessly, attempting to persuade Jinnah and the British Viceroy to avoid partition, which he saw as a moral tragedy. His decades of effort towards Hindu-Muslim unity were being threatened by political decisions made at the highest level. Ultimately, the pressure of communal violence and political realities proved insurmountable. The plan for the partition of India into two separate nations, India and Pakistan, was accepted by the major political parties. The bittersweet victory. On August 15, 1947, India achieved its long-sought freedom. The nation celebrated with immense joy, but the triumph was instantly overshadowed by unprecedented violence. As the lines of partition were drawn, millions of Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs were forced to migrate, leading to massacres and riots across Punjab and Bengal. While Delhi and the rest of the country were celebrating independence, Gandhi was nowhere near the festivities. He spent his time in Calcutta, Kolkata, and later in the riot-torn villages of Noakhali, now in Bangladesh, embarking on a personal pilgrimage to restore peace. He walked barefoot, unarmed, entering areas gripped by hate and fear, appealing to the humanity of the rioters. His sheer presence and moral authority were often the only things that stopped the killing. He undertook several fasts, using the voluntary suffering of his own body as the final appeal to the conscience of the warring communities. He declared that his work for peace was far more important than attending the ceremony of political power transfer. Gandhi was a man who won freedom for his nation, only to dedicate his final days to mourning and healing it. The final sacrifice. Gandhi's commitment to an inclusive, secular India earned him the enmity of Hindu extremists who blamed him for the partition and for being too accommodating to Muslims. On January 30th, 1948, while holding his evening prayer meeting in Delhi, Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated by Nathuram Godse. He died instantly, with the word "Hey Ram," O God, on his lips, a final testament to his deep faith and peace. The assassination plunged the newly independent nation and the world into shock and mourning. His death was a tragic end to a life defined by nonviolence, but his sacrifice cemented his image as an eternal symbol of peace and moral resistance. The enduring legacy. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, the shy boy from Porbandar, left behind a legacy that transcends politics and national borders. Political impact. He created the blueprint for mass civil disobedience, a method that allowed an unarmed populace to challenge entrenched power with moral authority. Global influence. His philosophy of Satyagraha directly inspired some of the greatest freedom fighters and civil rights leaders of the 20th century, including Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the American Civil Rights Movement and Nelson Mandela in the fight against apartheid in South Africa. Moral code. His life was a powerful demonstration of simple living, high thinking, self-discipline, and the unwavering belief that means must always be as pure as the end goal. He proved that true, lasting change is won not through brute force, but through love, truth, and courage. The Mahatma's story teaches us that true leadership requires vulnerability, perseverance, and the radical courage to refuse hatred. His journey from a common man to a global icon is perhaps the most motivating story of personal and political transformation the modern world has ever seen. We hope these 5 detailed parts have provided you with a truly deep and inspirational understanding of Mahatma Gandhi's life. Subscribe to this channel for more stories of phenomenal personalities and to continue your journey of learning English with engaging, motivational content.